Hi, I'm Chad, and today I'm going to be showing you my process for doing twice turned bowls. That's where you start with green wood, you rough out the bowl, then dry it, then you put it back on the lathe and finish turn it so your finished bowl remains stable, but you can still use green wood to produce it. So I'm going to show you my process for doing that. That's how I do most of my work. I do it very simply, and I hope you find it helpful. Our goal with twice turned bowls, once we have the roughed blank, is to slow the drying process so the wood can move and the tensions in the wood can be released as the moisture comes out, but not so quickly that it cracks. There's several ways we can slow the drying process. You can use an alcohol soak, which I don't recommend. I've tried it in the past several times. I don't find it to be beneficial, and you also have a bucket of flammable alcohol sitting around your shop. Another method is kilns. I don't really have a big shop, so I don't have a lot of room for a kiln. There are plenty of instructions out there online if you want to build one, and some people swear by them. I know lots of people use them, but if you have a small shop, it might not be the most practical thing for you. Next, we have things that are coatings like anchor seal or tree saver. You could also use actual wax or paint, and basically that slows the drying process by creating a film barrier around the wood. Having to buy those products continually, it gets expensive. Finally, we have my favorite method because it's cheap and it's simple, and that is paper bags. And it could be grocery bags. These lawn and leaf bags are handy, and there's some different ways you can use those I'll talk about in just a minute. But the good thing about that is I can just stuff it into a corner of my shop, on a shelf, wherever, and just let the pieces dry there. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to rough out this blank and talk about the considerations you want to think about while you're turning your roughed blank, and then I will show you my drying process, and then I'll finish turn one of these dry bowls. I've got a big piece of bur oak here, which is extremely hard, extremely heavy, and it has a tendency to crack while drying, I'm learning, but I'm going to try to get a twice turned bowl out of this. The finished bowl that I turn will actually be a different type of wood. I don't have any dried bur oak blanks at the moment. I've already roughed out the outside. I'm going to do a couple passes just to clean it up, and then move to the inside. And what you want to do with the rough out is leave the thickness of the wall about 10% of the diameter of the bowl. And I don't know, in this case, this is maybe 11 inches in diameter, so I'll probably leave it about an inch, maybe inch and a quarter thick. Let me get through that, get it roughed out, and then we'll move on to the next step. Some of the things you want to consider as you're shaping your rough out, you want kind of smooth curves, avoid any hard angles. I find that seems to be where the cracks happen. End grain is obviously where you're going to find cracks as well. But I don't even leave my corners sharp. I kind of round them over. And it just seems to me like any place where you have a sharp angle is going to be more prone to splitting. Maybe that makes no sense, but if someone out there knows more about wood movement physics than I do, I'd love to hear the answer. You want the consistent thickness. This one is pretty thick at the bottom because I've got some screws in there for this face plate. So I'll show you how I will deal with that. And just remember, you're keeping a simple shape. You've got plenty to work with in making the final shape of your piece. The next step, and this is optional, but it's something I like to do, is weigh the bowls before I set them aside to dry. That way I can kind of gauge how dry they are. And you'll see, like on these, where I've written weight over time as it's dried, and this one has lost 22%. This one's lost about 22%. That one, 35%. So that's how much of the weight they've lost of their original weight. So usually I look for somewhere in, depending on the woods, if it's been sitting around, it's a little drier, I don't expect it to lose as much. Some I like to only partially dry, so some of the warping comes out of it, and then turn it, and let it continue warping, and that way it doesn't distort quite as much, but you still get a little of that effect. With this big bowl, let's see how much it weighs first. I like using grams, so technically it's mass, I guess. 3,646. So I would expect that to weigh about 2,500 grams when I'm ready to turn it. So because it is so big and thick, and this is something I do if there are, especially with the tenons, since it's a little thicker there, I like to use one of the materials I talked about that are coatings, which either anchor seal, this is Tree Saver, I've just recently started using this, glue, whatever, and I just coat the tenon. A little water helps spread it. I'll coat the tenon and kind of the bottom section so it doesn't, slows the drying process even more in those areas, and that'll help prevent cracking in these parts where it's most prone. If I were, and this might be something I do later on to this one, occasionally I will coat the whole bowl and then still put it in a paper bag to really slow down the process. So, you kind of have to adjust it. It's more art than science. Since I put some water on there, I want to make sure I have a good coat on it, so I'm going to put just a little bit more, then set it aside to dry for a few minutes, and we'll be right back. You have a few different options for how you want to bag your rough outs. For this one, I'm going to do it individually in a standard grocery bag, and a lot of grocery stores have them. They don't use them, but if you ask them for some, sometimes they'll just hand you a wad of them. I just get them there. Now, with plastic bags, I use plastic bags for like medium-term storage of cut blanks, and I suppose you could also dry in a plastic bag if you really wanted to, opening it periodically. But paper, you can feel that the paper will take on some of the moisture. And so as I was saying, there are multiple ways you could do it. Like you can put shavings inside and, with an individual bowl or maybe a couple small bowls. Or with one of these big yard waste bags, you could I've put 20 bowls in it before, and you just throw some shavings, some bowls, some shavings, some bowls, up to, 3/4 full, fold it over, and just set it aside. And usually I'll check on the pieces, make sure they're not cracking. Initially, every 1 to 2 days, and you can use CA glue, super glue, in the cracks if you see some start to form, and that can, kind of help avoid making things worse. The whole idea is to slow down the drying process, so the bag and the shavings can help with that. If you're using the shavings from what you just turned, they have moisture in them, so it slows it down, helps the bowl to adjust and warp. You can see how much this one has warped, even though it's 1 inch thick. So I'm probably going to turn this one as the example. Since this bowl is so big and heavy, and it's made out of burr oak, that I have a little more concern about it cracking, I'm going to double bag it. I might throw some shavings in there as well, and then I'll set it aside, check on it every couple days for maybe a week or so, make sure there's no cracks, stabilize them with super glue, CA glue if there are. So each time I check on it, I'll make a note of how much it weighs, and I would expect it to dry in to where I want it in probably 6 weeks to get it to where it's totally stable, like in this environment. That could take a few months. I don't mind a little warping and that sort of thing, so this will probably be 6 weeks or so. I'll expect it to lose 25-30% of its weight. That's usually kind of the point where I start to use them, is when they've lost between maybe 20 and 40%. And some woods just take longer than others. Some dry quickly, and you can dry them faster because they are flexible. So it's going to vary wood to wood. You have to just experiment and see what works. But this method of paper bag shavings and the sealers, has served me well. I probably have a 90+% success rate with them. So super cheap, easy. So now we'll just set it aside. Now we'll put the red oak bowl in the chuck and turn it down to its final shape. I tried to put this in the chuck, and I wasn't able to get it to settle into a place where I felt like I could get a good grip on it, and this rarely happens, but occasionally it does. So I'm just going to put a little padded jam chuck in and hold it with the tailstock and bring that back to round with a nice angle that the jaws will sit on. I think I still have a center hole right there. So here's our finished round bowl that's going to stay round. The only thing left to do would be remove the tenon and put some finish on it. But this is red oak. So here are two examples. These are both bur oak, which is the type of wood we started with. And this one was twice turned, and you can see that it's still nice and round. And this one was still pretty green when it was turned, but I was able to dry it slowly enough that even with this, overhung lip, it has only, a superficial crack. So it was, slowing that drying process down, made the wood able to move and adjust. And, you can see it's pretty dramatic. Anyway, I hope you learned something. I hope that helped if you've been having problems with drying twice turned blanks. But there's, like I said before, there's all sorts of ways to do it. I'm sure you all have your own tips and tricks, so I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, this is a little more instructional than what I typically do. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and I hope you'll hit like and subscribe to my channel. Come back for future videos. Check out the catalog of past videos. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.